All right. So today we're going to talk about our time in Lesotho. So for those of you who have never heard of Lesotho before us, I think you're pretty much along with the rest of the general public. It's a very tiny country inside of South Africa, and they live in the country of Lesotho, and they speak Sesotho, and they are the Basotho people. So that's not confusing at all. We just caught on right away. So we did learn a little bit of Sesotho while we were there, because in Lesotho, the well-educated people, the younger crowd basically, they speak a fair amount of English, but the older people don't so much. So like in our families, our host brothers, they spoke English, and then our host parents did not. So that was interesting communication-wise. So we did actually have to learn enough to be polite to our parents, to do the Dumelame, Upela Juan, Gepela Hantle. That's basically, good morning, how are you? I'm fine, thank you. That sort of thing. That's basically all we know. That and sheep, dinku. So anyhow, we can go ahead and, our picture's working. All right, so this is us at Growing Nations. Growing Nations is a place that hosted us, and they set us up with our host families. So they're an organization that teaches farming, which, since it's a farming deal, Michael will talk a little bit more about their philosophy and how they work there.
Yeah, so Growing Nations was, I don't remember the guy's name who was founded by. August. But August had originally gone to Lesotho, and he had built some greenhouses, and they were basically giving food to the people. And week after week, they were getting all of a sudden they're getting hundreds of people just coming to get food. So he actually, after a long process, came to this conclusion, or this new way of thinking of, why are we doing this? We need to do something that's more sustainable, because this is very expensive and it's not actually getting us anywhere. And so they actually started this organization where they're taking young adults to adults, and they're teaching them this thing called Farming God's Way. And so they're teaching these young adults to adults, and they're basically having these people bring in students, and then they start teaching the students. And so they're trying to create this cycle of teaching with local people.
Yeah, so basically they brought in a couple people from their church and instructed them how to farm in God's way. And then having those people then go into communities and bring people back to teach them how to teach or farm God's way. And it kind of is this cycle so that they can start to grow this mindset of farming a different way than they've been taught for years and years.
And with this organization is that the local people, the villagers, they actually run it. They have help. They have outside help as far as if they run into a major problem.
What did I do? Okay.
But they're just trying to get the local people to take it on, and they do research and stuff there with cover crops, and they have test plots so that they can figure out what works best in their area, and then they can bring it to their neighbors and stuff.
Yeah, so one of the keys there is, in Lesotho, it's very mountainous. And so they say that one of their biggest exports is their soil. And so that's really problematic for the farming community, because they end up with all this erosion that leads to something that they call dongas. So basically, a donga is basically a big...
Does anyone know what the Badlands look like? It looks just like the Badlands. It's just all of a sudden you get this ditch, and then the soil keeps blowing out of it, and then all of a sudden you get this 20-foot cliff, and you get them all over the valley.
Yeah, so basically you end up with this tiny country with these huge ditches all around it that's not farmable, and then you're supposed to sustain all these people. So basically they taught them how to do like a no-till, no-plow farming with what they call God's blanket. So using like branches or wheat grass or things like that, old corn stalks or such, to kind of help keep from having erosion. And then they can start to create better soil for harvesting and actually start to do some donga restoration. So kind of start to fill in these ditches. So that's basically the biggest thing that they worked on there. Yeah. And just teaching just general concepts of crop rotation, which they'd never done there before. And like I said, the concept of no plows, that was hammered in big time. And as we traveled around the country to go to our host families, it was interesting to see basically the only people that didn't use plows were the students at Growing Nations. But then as you look at their crops versus the crops of the people that plowed, it was incredible how much different it looked.
But you got like corn that's like up to here and it's already drying, and then you got their corn, which is like taller than me. It's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, so the ways that they were teaching were very beneficial. And so it was really interesting for us to kind of learn, and to learn from even the students their thoughts on things, and to do things in a way that was chemical free as well. So we can go ahead and start going through some of the photos. So this is us being instructed a little bit about the farming, and we didn't actually have the cattle. The cattle back there was not.
No, it's all free range. Like they just have one guy who takes care of many cattle for many people.
So we can go ahead and go through a couple of these. So that's kind of their plot there that they're teaching us on. There's a picture in here somewhere. Oh, that's Michael chopping weeds. So we actually got the opportunity, I guess you would say, or the job of chopping down the weeds, and we would go through the fields and actually pull the weeds out. So that was fun. So actually what's funny is that little splasher that they were using, one of our girls got a little bit out of hand with it and actually chopped one of the guy's arms. Yeah, he ended up with a nice little scar on his arm. It was all good. He didn't end up having to go to the hospital or anything. He probably should have, but he was fine. Same guy that dislocated his shoulder, so.
Twice.
Yeah. So this is us how we traveled around. We would either walk or pile as many people into the back of this truck as possible, which was interesting. And then we learned how to do compost. So this was a big part of their training, is composting and things along those lines, to allow for improvement in the soil and get the nutrients going. And so we would build this compost pile with our the weeds that we chopped, and manure, and something else. I don't remember what else was there. There was 3 layers. I think it was dry, wet, and manure. And then after like 9 days or something like that, we would have to flip it. So that was interesting to see how they flipped this big pile of compost.
This thing's like 6 feet high, and it's like 6 feet by 6 feet high.
Yeah, it was a nice square of compost. So anyhow, that was a fun project that we got to work on with the students there. That was bonding time, I guess. We had a little fun around the compost pile. I think this was Joshua. He was actually the instructor that taught. He'd been with Growing Nations since the beginning of it. He's one of the locals, and he actually went to August's church when he first came to Lesotho, and Joshua really bought into this whole thing, and he's been the instructor there. And so he kind of does a lot of translating for things, and they also do religious instruction there too. And so it's kind of a weird mix of Bible college and ag school. But it was really cool because people came there for the purpose of farming, but they also had a Bible study every morning, and then they were instructed on biblical principles every so often. I don't know what exactly their schedule was with that.
And they would have like one-day seminars where they'd bring in they would pay for a bus or a taxi to pick up all these farmers from the surrounding area, and they would just come in and they would have like a table. I think they might have had some food or something for them, and they would go through all their test plots. And Joshua he'd talk about like what they're doing and the different types of things they're doing, and that way they could get more build up more local support or just like support of the idea.
Yeah, so it was actually a really interesting thing. This, like I said, they did the Bible study every morning. And there was one morning that I think we had at least 5 countries present and 4 continents represented in this Bible study. So, it was basically not a huge Bible study. It was mostly people from Lesotho in South Africa, but we had us Americans. And then there were some people visiting that help out for like 3 weeks at a time or a month at a time, something like that, from Australia. And then Barry and Heather, which were kind of our contact people there, are from England. And so we had all of these people together from 4 continents just talking about the Word of God. So that's pretty darn cool, I think. And so it was always interesting because we would start talking like on major theological stuff, and you see the students' eyes kind of glaze over because they have no idea what we're talking about. And so then we have to stop. Joshua, can you translate? It's like, really? You've just been talking for 10 minutes. I'm supposed to translate that? Yeah. But it was a really cool thing to be able to have that opportunity to see how God's working in all kinds of different places in the world and realize that mission work isn't necessarily an American thing. It's an international thing, and that people from all over the world are buying into this system here in Lesotho, this tiny little country in Africa. So it was kind of an eye-opening thing to see how God moves all of us to this one location at the same time. So we can check out a couple more farming pictures. I believe this is us cutting down beans. This was literally, we had
this hand shears.
Yeah, hand shears.
And we just go down the row in the hand shears and then build piles, and then somebody would come. We'd put the piles on top of a bag, and somebody would pick the bag up and go throw it in the truck. Yeah,
so what would take a farmer here, a couple hours maybe?
No, probably like 20 minutes. It's a pretty small field.
So what would take a farmer here 20 minutes to harvest, it took us at least 2 or 3 days with a full group of people. And it was rough. And I was really disappointed that there were times that I didn't have the opportunity to go. I had some other special tasks that I had to do. And for some reason just wasn't able to go. I actually was doing legitimate stuff. What was interesting was Heather, that I mentioned before, Barry and Heather from England. When Barry and Heather first came out to Lesotho, they'd only been there for like a year and a half, something like that. When they first came out, they had gone on a little vacation to Namibia, which is the next country that we went to. And during that vacation, as they were driving, they hit a kudu, which is like a massive deer, and had a terrible car accident. So she was hospitalized for a few weeks. She had to end up having skin grafts and all kinds of stuff. Was stuck in South Africa getting treatment for a month or 2, I believe. And so she still had severe neck pain. So I actually had the opportunity to work on her neck while I was there and give her actual real therapy for her neck pain for a couple weeks and was able to do it consistently. Whereas before, she would go like once a month into South Africa over these bumpy roads, a six-hour drive. So by the time she got there, her neck was like a mess anyhow. And then she would get work done and then drive back a 6-hour drive and just ruin everything that had just happened at physical therapy. So that was my special project to do while they were harvesting, and I was more than happy to give up on the harvesting.
And if you can imagine, like we have some people who take their Jeeps and they go on these trails and stuff and do the crazy stuff like that. And that's like their normal roads. So can you imagine trying to have this neck pain, going to a physical therapist, going on this mountainous road?
Yeah, let's go 4x4 while you're having severe neck pain. Excellent, a good plan. But that was just life. That's how they got from place to place. So obviously I'm working really hard in this picture. But what we're doing here is actually doing something to help ward off, I think it was the birds, is that we tied like plastic bags to the top of these stalks.
Oh, this is sorghum. Is that how you say it?
Sorghum.
Sorghum.
I don't think that's sorghum, but is it?
Yeah, that is.
Maybe that's not what we were tying.
Because that has the sugar on top
Okay.
that they use to make other things.
Okay. Well, either way, we were doing something to help tie up the plastic bags on the top of these stalks, and the rustling of the bags kept the birds away, and so we were just like randomly tying stuff to the plants, and they didn't explain to us why at first, and so they're like, okay, here are the bags. We're like, okay, cool. What are we doing with this? Well, you tie them. Okay. So halfway through, we finally said, why on earth are we doing this? And they explained it. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. This is more bean harvesting. So we were literally down on the ground. So they had us doing road repair. Obviously, the girls were working really hard at repairing the road that day. But we did road repair after a major rain. You know, like I said, erosion is a big problem. They had these massive divots in the road. And so basically we took rocks, filled in the divots, and then covered it with mud. And I was actually on special project again during when this picture was taken, so I missed the mud fight. But I think the girls got a little bored making a road, and
I think they're becoming discouraged
fun.
from just throwing the rocks and stuff and going back and forth.
But anyhow, that was kind of something interesting that we were able to do that was very practical. That's Kylie, who got chopped with the slasher thing. And so you can see kind of the environment that we were working in. We had mountains everywhere around us, and I'll show you some more pictures of the mountains later, but that's kind of what we got to look at as we harvested the beans, so it wasn't so bad. And that was our crew before we piled into the pickup. And I don't know what exactly we were doing that day. It might have been donga restoration. I'm not really sure, but we were doing something. They kept us pretty busy. So this is our crew with the students that were there that would end up being our host brothers and sisters. And I think there's another picture of us. This was after we'd known each other for a little while, so we were having a good time with each other. So we ended up having 2 different host brothers, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But we can go ahead and show the next one. So this was our first host brother. When we met our host brothers at first, they gave us their American name, or their English name. And so as far as we were concerned, his name was Thomas. His name is not Thomas. His name is Tayello. He just told us his name was Thomas. And so we were very confused at first. Yeah. Like, what on earth is this guy's name? So this is Tayello. We stayed with his family. And his family was actually very interesting. basically we had no idea who on earth his family was until the last day that we were there. Because everybody would come up and say, I'm his brother, I'm his brother, I'm his other brother. I'm like, okay. I swear Tyelo said he had one brother. I'm very confused as to who on earth his brother is. Or if Tyelo just doesn't know how to count or what. What it ended up being was that basically anybody with the same last name as him, like uncles, cousins, whatever, they all just considered each other brothers and sisters. And so there was one day that there was a girl over, and we were like, Tyelo, is this like your girlfriend? Because he was acting like it was his girlfriend. Like, no, this is my sister. Like, what? This is not your sister. So we were trying to get answers to this, and finally we just started like drawing out a family tree. I'm like, we're very confused. Explain to us how she's related. Well, we have the same last name. Okay, so how is she related? Well, we had the same last name. Okay. So we just had to accept that's how they were related. And this is our grandma. So this would be Tyelo's grandmother. She was an interesting lady. She worked really hard. They had 3 different houses, each with like 2 rooms in them. They shared one bathroom, which was an outhouse. One morning I came out, and you can kind of see the front area there. There's a little bit of cement, and it's just mostly dust, mostly sand. So one morning I came outside of our house that we were staying in, and she was literally sweeping the dirt so that the dirt path was nice and pretty. I'm like, I don't... But they're very into making sure things were clean and nice, and they didn't have super nice things, but what they had, they made sure they took care of. So she worked really hard to take care of us, and she boiled the water for our bucket baths in the morning. But she also took care of some of the kids in the neighborhood too. So some kids, I think the oldest was what, 10? Yeah. There were 3 boys that were living in a house. And they had no parents there, and we don't know where the parents were. I think they were in South Africa.
Yeah, a lot of these families, what they'll do is like the parents, they'll get work in South Africa, which is quite a ways away. So they'll just leave their children there, and they'll just leave and go work. And then the community is expected to pick up the slack as far as feeding the children and making sure that their house is clean and doing all the chores and stuff for their house.
Yeah, so it was always interesting when we had dinner. It was always, well, how many people are we cooking for tonight? Like, we have no idea. And it was basically whoever showed up got food. So, kind of cool, I think. And that was the house that we stayed in.
Which is actually really nice inside.
Yeah. Yeah, it was two rooms. We got a bedroom. Tyelo slept on a mattress on the floor. And this is our dad, and what we found out to be the actual brother. We really, at the time this picture was taken, we had no idea who this kid was. We're like, all right, he's making corn with us. That's awesome. But this is how they would cook their corn, and it was maize, and they called it pony. So people would very regularly actually just like hand you a piece of maize and say, pony? Okay, sure. And so you don't eat it like you would eat normal corn on the cob. You flick it off with your finger and then pop in. And it kind of tasted like popcorn. It's pretty good.
Yeah, sometimes it popped like popcorn.
Yeah. So I just thought this was a cool picture. We did our laundry by hand, and it would hang dry. But then you've got the nice backdrop of the mountains. It's kind of cool. But it was a lot of work to do laundry. So this was, I'm trying to remember what the next picture is. How much to explain. But this was, we had a bunch of people over at our house, and which actually resulted in us moving on to a different host family. So in Lesotho, it is not uncommon for people to make their own beer. And so our family happened to do that. They made their own beer, and when they do that, they put up a white flag in front of their house and say, we have beer available, and then people show up. So these people had a few beverages and were showing us the local dance.
Yeah.
It was entertaining. There's the beer.
And previous days, we were hauling all this water because you had to go to the tap, which is quite a ways, and get 5-gallon buckets and haul your water back. We're like, what are we doing with all this water? And then we didn't figure it out until all of a sudden people started showing up, and then we started,
yeah.
Now it makes sense.
Yeah, we saw a white flag. That's odd. Then people show up. Okay.
And they have different colored flags, like the white ones for like corn or maize, and then they have one for sorghum.
Yeah, it was an interesting experience. Yeah. So once we told the people at Growing Nations that we were essentially living in a bar, they decided that maybe that wasn't the best environment for us to be living in and moved us over to a different family. So this is our new family. This is our host brother, Sotan, which is the guy next to Michael, and then May Masipati, who was our mother, and then Sotan's 3 little sisters. And then two of our teammates also were there. That's why we ended up being able to move there so quickly, is that actually Lindsay, the girl in the white hat, she was our leader, and so she's the one that we told about what was going on. And they said, well, they have room at our house. We can ask May if it's okay. And what was really cool is May got the phone call. I mean, they literally, at their house, they have 5 forks, 5 plates. They have exactly what they need. And no more. So May was asked, can you take on 2 more people? And her immediate response, Lindsay watched it, her immediate response was, I think it was actually Hakuna Matata, which means no problem, absolutely. So we went out there, we were given a half an hour to pack, I think.
Yeah, it was very quick.
Yeah, so we were given a half an hour to pack, and then we were picked up by Barry and Heather, and we headed out there. And what was funny is we got there, and we got our new Sesotho names, and we were told that we were supposed to introduce ourselves as Mochela now. That was their last name. And so I'm Mimosa Mochela, he's Khoso Mochela. And so, anyhow, we had gotten our Sesotho names when we first got there, and then her husband came home. She hadn't told him that there was going to be new people, and so we introduced ourselves. I'm Mimosa Mochela, and he's like, what on earth is going on? You just said my last name, but I don't know who you are. So, but he was very kind and very nice. He was just a little bit confused as to why these new American people were here. So anyhow, that was our new family that we ended up moving into. So that's May and Ntate. May basically means ma'am, and Ntate means sir, but that's just what we called them. I actually don't even know Ntate's real name. May is Masipati, and then that's Ntate. I don't know. And that's our little sister, Mama Hau. So she didn't really speak English, but she was awesome. She just was a lover. She was sweet as could be, and she made our time there really entertaining and made us feel like we were really part of the family. Like May was always great, Sotan was always great, but Mama Hau, I think, is how we really knew that we were in. Like the first day where she just wanted to cuddle, and so she would come up and raise her arms, and we would cuddle. And I'm like, all right, I'm in.
The funniest moment was we were sitting there eating dinner, and then she must have been tired because she closed her eyes and fell asleep standing up and then fell over. And it's like, she's really comfortable with us. This is great.
May, Sotong, and Lindsay, and this is actually on Lindsay's birthday. So Lindsay celebrated her birthday while we were there. It was actually Good Friday that her birthday fell on. And so May said, oh, you guys go to church. I'm gonna stay home. So while we were away, she put together a party. And so they don't have much, but what they did was they went around the community and asked for basically any decorations that they had, that anybody had, and they could pitch them in to throw Lindsay an awesome birthday party. So they borrowed a table, and they ended up being mostly Christmas decorations. And then they ended up with getting cake for her, and we had soda, and it was just a really cool thing to see how selfless they're willing to be and how willing the community was to give what they had. They might not have much, but they gave what they had so that Lindsay could have an awesome birthday that she could always talk about, which she refers to, yeah, I had, 20 of my closest Lesotho friends come for my birthday party. So we had all kinds of people from the community just show up for this birthday party because they helped create it. So that was a really cool thing to be able to witness. And then there's the sheep. So I don't know if any of you read the blog that we put up. I kind of love sheep now. So we took care of, I think it was somewhere between 8 sheep. Yeah. Every day we would go and we would take them out. We would put stakes in the ground, kind of basically walk them on their leashes, put stakes in the ground, and then they would graze around their staked area. And then we'd water them in the afternoon, and then we'd take them out and put them back to bed in the evening. And so there was one day that one of the teammates actually said something really interesting. I was getting so frustrated with this stupid sheep. Because we were there to water it, and it had gotten itself all kinds of tangled up. Like, it could not move. It wrapped itself around and tied up all 4 of its legs. And so I had just untangled it. I turned around to fix another sheep, and I turned back around, and it was back in the exact same position. Like, what the heck is wrong with you, you stupid sheep? And so my wise teammate actually said, so you remember in the Bible how God says that we're sheep? This is what he's talking about. I'm like, yeah, okay, that makes perfect sense. You know, we talk about God being the good shepherd, and so that means that we're sheep. And after having seen sheep, I know how stupid they are. And they just keep getting themselves into these messes. They just follow the crowd. No matter where they're going, they just follow. They get themselves all kinds of tangled up. And then we as the shepherds come in, fix what they just messed up, and put them on their merry way and think they should be fine until they get themselves tangled up again. And how true is that of our life in Christ? Is that how often does God shows us the way to do things, and we choose to do whatever the heck we want to do and get ourselves in a mess, and then God comes and untangles us again patiently, much more patient than I was. He's the good shepherd. I was the bad shepherd. But much more patiently just continues to fix the problems that we've created for ourselves. So that became very real for me in Lesotho, having actually spent time with sheep and understanding what a shepherd actually goes through and how much a shepherd really does love his sheep. We were out one day with Sotong, and we'd been gone all day. We'd left relatively early in the morning. And it was probably 5-ish. Sotong was like, we need to go home. I'm like, oh, okay, why do we need to go home? I miss my sheep. Okay, we'll go home. If you miss your sheep, then we'll go home and we'll take care of the sheep. So anyhow, I now love sheep. How cute is that, right?
That's a big one, though, because I was looking at his horns, and they had the chain in his horn, but the other one used to have a hole in it, but it broke.
Yeah.
So he must have broke his horn.
Yeah, he's a good size sheep. So this is Michael being a ladder. And we did some landscaping while we were there. I'm not 100% sure what the point was.
When we were talking earlier about them sweeping, what they do is at the front of their house, they basically take all the sod off and make like a patio, a dirt patio, and then they keep sweeping until all the dirt is away and it's just like a nice flat, solid, but like a solid dirt surface.
Yeah. So
outside floor.
Yeah, we did some landscaping. That was me with an excessively long rake. I don't know why the rake was that long, but that's a rake. So this was our cab one day. This was us at the front of the cab. There was, 2 rows behind, right? That was a very odd experience. Maybe 3 rows.
Yeah,
I think there's 3 rows behind.
3 rows.
And so Michael was going to sit right behind us, but when he sat down, the seat actually flipped backwards on him, so he chose to sit on the one that was bolted down. We could literally see the ground below us as we drove along. And I actually did get hit on during this ride by a fellow that was fairly intoxicated. But I learned that he loves me more than an apple, which means an apple. He loves me like an apple. Like, all right. So that was our joke between Sotong and Lebohong, our other guy that we spent a good time with there, is that basically every time Sotong saw me after that, like, Rachel, I love you like an apple. Like, all right, Sotong. And we got to ride donkeys. Michael's is the best. Check out his feet. He's like touching the floor.
A little small for me.
And so this was just our daily walk. We actually slept in Grandma's house, and then we spent the day at Megan and Tate's house, because Grandma's house had more bedrooms. And that's the extended family. So they had, I think it was cousins that lived like right next door. Basically, they knew everybody in the community. And basically, everyone in the community became our family. And was very accepting of us. And what's interesting is you look at these people and you say they have so little. But then you look at this family and this is their life. This is what they do every day. They just spend their time with their family and they love each other and they take care of each other. And you know, we talked before last time about what poverty actually is. And then you look at how these people live, and that's our definition of poverty. How they live is our definition of poverty, because they don't have running water, they don't have electricity, they don't have all this stuff. Everything that they own is under their bed or in, 2 cupboards? But they're happy, they're content, and they have family, and they have community, and they love each other. And I look at that and say, who has more poverty in their lives? Is it really them, or is it us? I mean, how often do you walk down the street and see, obviously we don't have mountains here, but you see someone down the road and you just start talking to them randomly. Like, we would have conversations, or at least our host brothers would have conversations with people, and we wouldn't even have any idea where they were at. We would be looking around like, who on earth are they talking to? Because it's somebody up on the other side of the mountain.
A long distance conversation.
But that happened all the time because community was important to them. Now I need something to drink.
No, I mean, it'd just be funny because, I mean, literally the person would be probably at least half a mile away, if not a quarter mile away. And they'd just be like yelling, talking.
Yeah, so every day as we went down the road, we would have to greet everybody, because that's just your expectation there, is that you greet everybody, because everybody's part of your family. And so it's strange being back here and being like, we just don't talk to people.
Yeah, shut in our house.
Yeah. Except for our awesome neighbors who we love to talk to.
Yeah, right over there. That's our neighbors.
All right, so this was our bathroom. It was That was our nice bathroom.
Yeah, that was actually a nice one.
That was the nice one. The one at Tyella's was pretty sketchy.
You feel like?
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was our bathtub. So the more like the greenish one is what we would use, and then the yellow one is how we would have a cold water bucket and a hot water bucket, and we would kind of mix them into the greenish bucket and do our bath. What was really fun for the women was that we did our bath together. So there were 3 of us with those buckets in a lovely, probably from the edge of here to what about right here. There were 3 of us taking our bath together with those buckets. And on the other side of the curtain was a dead sheep.
Yeah, they just killed it and they put it inside this bag.
So
and they were just cutting it. I mean, this had been like 2 or 3 days they were eating it. This.
Yeah, so we felt pretty clean after bathing there. And this is us at a wedding. That was probably one of the most random experiences of our life. So that's kind of.
That's like a nicer wedding than a lot of weddings over here.
So yeah, we had gone to church the Sunday before, and some lady came up and was like, "Oh, you're invited to my son's wedding." Like, okay, cool. We had no idea if we were going or not, but we ended up going. It was actually on Easter, and so we walk in, and there were, I think, 7 of us, something like that. Maybe, I don't know, maybe 9 of us. I think there were 9 of us. So anyhow, we walk in, and literally there's hundreds of people there, and the entire, everybody at the wedding turns around and looks at us and starts cheering. We're like, okay. And then we look at the bride and groom, and they're doing like their cake thing where they're feeding each other, and you're cheering for us. Excellent. So then we were put in a place of honor, and people were kicked out of their seats because we showed up and were given the table, and then we were asked to sing. So we became wedding singers. I think we sang Our God.
Yeah.
Because we're like, what are we supposed to sing for a wedding with no notice? So fortunately, we had one girl on our team that actually is a very good singer, and another guy.
She actually did traveling singing ministry or something.
Yeah, so we were very fortunate that she was there with us. If it had just been the 2 of us, we'd have been in big trouble. And then we each had to individually go up and take a picture with the bride and groom. And so I was kind of trying to get out of doing that, and was like, oh, we're married, let's take a picture together. That just meant that we got more pictures. So we ended up having to do a picture with our rings, and then we had to do a picture with the 4 of us, and then we did a picture with each one of us individually. And I'm like, well, shoot, that totally backfired on me. So anyhow, we went to a wedding. It was really weird. And so this was our wedding crew. This was a group that was kind of living all in the same community. This was right outside of our church. And same crew. I don't know why I put 2 of those in there. And this was basically our group that we spent most of our time with. So Tong, which was our host brother, and Lebo Hong, which is his good friend, and then the 4 of us from our team, we would basically hang out every night. We would get sent to bed around 6 because it was getting dark, and so it was bedtime, but we weren't ready to go to sleep yet. So Lebo Hong and So Chang would come over, and we would play cards for an hour or so, and go to bed at a reasonable time of 7:30. And so this was just our time of saying goodbye to the crew there. We got to know them fairly well. This was Rafiwe. She hosted the other girls in our community.
One of the students.
Yeah. So there's a couple things that I wanted to share before we move on from the community aspect of things. A couple of verses that I had to kind of keep in mind during the course of our time there, because there were times that it was like, what on earth are we doing? Like, are we accomplishing anything? And in the grand scheme of things, I think we were. We are building relationships, we're affirming them, and we learned a whole heck of a lot about ourselves. Yeah. And I like to think that we actually made an impact in the community because they saw us showing them love and saw us saying, living the way that they did, and saying, this is great, like, this is good, and you have been so blessed. But one of the verses I came across towards the end of my time there is a verse in Isaiah. It's Isaiah 4, and it says, I replied, but my work seems so useless. I have spent my strength for nothing and have no purpose. Yet I leave it all in the Lord's hands. I will trust God for my reward. And so to read that towards the end of it and say, okay, even though through those times that I feel like I've accomplished nothing, it's in God's hands. I just need to give it up to God and trust that God is going to use us in whatever way he wants to use us. And then another verse that Lindsay actually pointed out was kind of a prayer for each of us as we set forth every day. And it's in 1 Corinthians, it's chapter 2, verse 2. And it says, for I decided that while I was with you, I would forget everything except for Jesus Christ, the one who was crucified. And so that kind of helped us stay focused during the course of our day and say, what's the point of what we're doing? The point is not to build roads, take care of sheep, take care of the plants. It's to serve Christ. And if we keep our focus on Christ and doing what we believe in our heart that Christ honestly wants us to do, then we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And so that really helped us, I think, to say that prayer every day and say, where's my focus at? Christ, that's all that matters. Okay, let's move on with our day. So I think we've got, this was a really super cool experience. We had the opportunity to baptize a couple of our teammates who came in actually as non-Christians. One of them actually claimed to be an atheist when we started for this Christian organization. So anyhow, this is us during our time of testimony before we got to baptize Maddie. And so all of us basically got to tell our story as to how we became Christians and basically say, yeah, we're all messed up, but we love God, so it's all good, and God has saved us from this tough time. So we can go through a few of these pictures of Maddie's baptism fairly quickly. But basically, Maddie came in, like I said, as an atheist. She used this trip as an opportunity to blackmail her parents. She said, here are the options. Either you let me go to Africa or you let me transfer schools, because they didn't want her to transfer schools. And so they ended up deciding, all right, we'll let you go to Africa, to which she thought, oh no, it didn't work, backfired. So she went through her closet, dug out her Bible that she hadn't seen in years. She even says, yeah, I downloaded some Christian music so I could fake it. And it's like, all right, we'll see how it goes. So through this process this was about 4 months into the trip, and we just got the chance to love on her and say, you know, you have questions, that's awesome. We have questions too. Ask questions. We might not be able to give you the best answer, but you're not a terrible person for having questions. God's okay with that. The other thing that I think a lot of us learned is reserving judgment. I think so often in the church, we're so quick to judge people for their past, for their present, for whatever. And we all just got all of our stuff out on the table and said, we love you no matter what. No matter what you say, no matter what you do, we love you. You are our friend, you are our family. And so by having that relationship with her, I think she started to see what God's love is actually about, rather than what she had grown up with seeing in the church of people being so judgmental and hateful and mean to each other. And so that was kind of a gut check for us, I think, of how do we treat people here? in this situation, it's easy to say, we love you, we care for you, because we're stuck with this person for 6 months either way. So we better learn to like her. But in the church, somebody comes in, we don't know them, they don't dress right, they don't look right, they don't sound right, and we're mean sometimes, some of us, not all of us, but
I think it applies to people that we actually know for years too.
Yeah.
Might just all of a sudden they have like this annoying trait. It's like, oh, it's them again. But it's like, these are people that we have a relationship with.
Yeah, and so it was just kind of let's think about how it is that we are portraying what Christianity is. And when you really consider what we're making Christianity look like, it makes you really take a step back and see what it is that you can do better to portray the actual love of Christ. So anyhow, it was a really cool experience to be able to share with this baptism of this person that was an atheist, and now she's a Christian, and she's awesome, and she's pumped now that she's back home. She got her own study Bible. She's still asking questions, which is awesome. And she is a changed person. I talk to her now, and I'm like, where's Maddie? You have such a positive attitude. I don't understand. But she's been changed by Christ, and it's awesome. And there was another girl that also got baptized. It was a much smaller thing. We didn't have the big hoopla for it, but she also got baptized. And I think it was the same thing, that felt like she'd been judged by the church, and that the church was full of hypocrites. And we're like, yeah, we're hypocrites, but we love you, and Christ loves you, and that's not who Christ is.
Yeah, so she grew up in a church where they're like, you have to wear this because this is what you wear to church, and you have to sing these songs, you have to do it this way.
Yeah, so I think the rest of the pictures are just kind of fun little photos. We got to celebrate our 5th anniversary while we were there, so how cool is that we got to spend 5 years, our 5-year anniversary in a random country that most people haven't heard of. We got a sweet meal. By American standards, it's not an awesome meal. We got Sprite, which was awesome. And we had mashed potatoes, which was that was it right there. And meat. And we got cake. So they had a nice little candlelight dinner for us set up. So that was really sweet. Me in cornrows, I think I rock them pretty good. And this is Michael being a Lesotho man. I think he's a shepherd right now. So this is actually how they legit dress the shepherds up in the mountains. They have the Lesotho blanket, and then the hat. I don't know.
Protects them from the wind.
Yeah. So this was us on a sunrise hike up the mountain. I'm a little beet red, but we just went on a hike, so give me a break. And this is the crew that went on that hike. And that's just kind of a cool picture, I think. So from these, you can kind of get an idea of the beauty that we were surrounded by. This is our team there, and the next one's us being more like us. And we can just go through the next few pictures. But as you look around, we talk about Lesotho as if it's the most beautiful place that we've ever seen. And it's absolutely gorgeous. But when you talk to the people there, and we talk about how beautiful Lesotho is, they're like, oh, yeah, I guess so. And they don't see it. They don't see how beautiful of a place they live in. And then you think about back here, and how often in our lives we don't see the beauty that's around us because we're so used to it that we just stop seeing the beauty. We got to look up in the sky at night and see the most gorgeous stars ever. Because there was nothing getting in the way of them. And there was crazy stuff up in the sky that I'd never seen before. But then you think about, we have stars here. How often do we actually look at them? We have sunrises, we have sunsets here. But how often do we actually look at them? The same thing that they have in Lesotho. We don't have the mountains, but we have all this beauty, but we're so used to seeing it all the time that we don't pay attention to it. And actually, it's kind of sad. By the time our 6 weeks were up in Lesotho, we were so used to seeing the beauty there that we just stopped being in awe of it, which I think is a terrible way to go. So that's kind of my challenge for you guys as well, is to say, look, there's beauty all around us. Why don't we start seeing it, and not just saying, oh, how beautiful that place was that you were at. We've got amazing things here. So anyhow, that was an hour about Lesotho. Okay, good. I actually did cover everything that was on my card. So we probably don't have a lot of time for any questions, but are there any like burning questions? Okay. Maybe next time I'll actually leave time for questions. I'll try. I don't think we have nearly as much to talk about.
I think it's just so challenging to take 6 months and condense it into such a period of time.
Yeah, hopefully we don't bore you guys to tears, but if you do, just fake it and tell us you like it.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you all for listening. If you have other questions for us, feel free to let us know, ask us personally. And we do have our photo albums downstairs, so we brought those again today, so if you want to look through them, we have all 3 of them from South Africa, Lesotho, and Namibia.